Hi guys, this is Alex here. This is going to be a short video to explain the PDF of suggestions. This is the newer PDF that has been going out since August of 2025. The format and some questions that people might have with regard to microbiome balancing and implementing it for their first round. So I'm going to share my screen here. Once again, thanks for listening. This is just meant to kind of ease some of those questions and concerns. So in the email that you receive from me for people that are participating with the microbiome balancing, there'll be a brief description of some issues, maybe some symptoms and some compounds that support those symptoms, and then some quick summary of the dysfunction in the microbiome that is ascertainable, and then attached will be a PDF document that has several many pages on it. It's usually labeled with respect to the kit ID that is your test. So this first couple of pages are meant to just um, introduce some information that potentially before starting you want to be privy to, because everyone is in a different situation. It's very hard to know the severity and the reactivity, and then the underlying potential issues of motility and other dysfunctions, maybe histamine, oxalates, ammonia, issues with certain organs being taxed more than others, adrenals, so on and so forth. So this first page kind of outlines some of those key things on there. Now, depending on the complexity of the dysbiosis that you have, there might be 10 suggestions, there might be 20 suggestions of supplements. Not all of the supplements are intended to be taken every day. The frequency is going to be listed on the following pages of this PDF. But also there will be a column that says mode of action that has a number associated to it. And we'll show you that as we get to those suggestions moving forward. But the number indicates the severity with regard to that particular mode of action. So a number of one is less severe than a number of three. And you can use this to actually minimize some of the suggestions. If for instance, 20 items is way too much, you can look at only the items that have a number three if you really wanted to focus on those, and that would likely bring the total number of suggestions down significantly. Or you can decide to do two and three, right, leaving off the numbers one. So this first statement over here is basically meant to kind of convey that. The second statement starts with support modes. Now, there are some specific support modes that are probably going to be identified with the symptom form that you filled out. And these are things that just keep coming up over and over and over again in ASD, especially. They extend outside of ASD as well, but they seem to be more prominent and more exacerbated in ASD. Not everyone will need the support modes for all of the modes, but for some people going into it, even before starting, they might need them. The number one thing that you want to make sure that you're addressing is motility. And once again, that isn't an issue for everybody. For some people, it's a significant issue. So, the motility is a very kind of a broad word, what we mean by that. But at the very least, we want to make sure that we're having one bowel movement a day, at the very least. If you're not, that's a sign that there's issues with motility. You still could have one bowel movement a day and still have motility issues because motility also takes into account the transit time. So, for instance, if you ate something on a Monday and you didn't have a bowel movement until Friday, that would be a non-ideal motility. The only way to know that is to measure that with some kind of food that you eat that's very easy to see, in the bowel movement. Like beets are very red, or some people will eat corn. You can see it come out the other side. It doesn't digest well. You know, typically transit time should be in that 12 to 20-hour range. And, excuse me, outside of that, it starts to become not ideal because then the food starts to fester and it adds to toxicity that kind of brews and things like that. So, um, but at the very least, if you're not having a bowel movement a day, that is a clear indication that you don't have to do anything, any major investigations. We need to work on that. And there's a lot of tools for that. Know that each one of these tools acts in a different way. Some agents bring water into the colon, making it easier to push out and have a bowel movement. Other agents actually stimulate motility by stimulating the muscles in that GI tract, that motor complex, the peristalsis, and helps you to kind of push the food out from that perspective. And there's a combination of things in between. Many people might be familiar with magnesium. Magnesium citrate's a good way to go. Some people might be familiar with magnesium oxide or hydroxide or oxy powder. That can be very effective for some people, but the problem with taking magnesium oxide or oxypower consistently is that the oxygen content will negatively affect the microbiome. Good fraction of the microbiome is anaerobic, so the oxygen will kill things preferentially. So it's very good at making things move, but it's not ideal to, and it also seems to be very dependent in a sense. Many people need it, to once they start using it. So I tend to not use it that much. We have a little bit of it in our mega motility, but it's a tiny amount, and it's really just meant to kind of get things going there. Not to say that you completely avoid it, but if it's your only go-to, that's probably not good. Other things that help with motility. We have a specific probiotic called three-strain probiotic. It includes three clone strains of specific, very useful probiotics that have been helpful in addressing types of SIBO. Is this for you? If it's not for you, if you don't have motility issues, you probably don't need to be looking at this. But depending on what's going on in the test, there might be some gaseous overgrowth, and I might recommend this. So those three strains are Lactobacillus reuteri, DSM 17938, the same one that's in BioGaia, Bifidobacterium animalis, Lactis HN019. Probably one of the most effective things at getting the motility, the transit to reduce in time and the motility to increase. Um, Also very helpful in different types of SIBO. The first one that I mentioned was helpful for methane SIBO. And then the third one is Lactobacillus plantarum 299V, very helpful with hydrogen sulfide types of SIBO. These three help kind of move things along and get rid of any bloating and distension that you may have. Um, Now, all of these things they work in different ways. So, do you have to take all of them? No, but it is very much the case that everyone is different and they might find something that just works better for them and they layer things on as needed. Vitamin C can has a laxative effect, in the 500 plus milligram range. It has other benefits that it helps with histamine and it also helps against free radicals. So that's a go-to there that you can use, you can trial. Fennel seed's very good for getting rid of gas and helping with motility. Nature's Way has a good fennel seed. Typically people could start with one cap and go to two to three, depending on the age. Two caps is probably fine for a kid that's, over 3 years old. And it's going to help with that bloating or distension. Prune juice can often be an easy way to get some people to go. I've had some people where it was the only thing that helped them go. Um, Ginger, very helpful, but sometimes it's hard to get in because of the taste. Flaxseed powder, helpful. Aloe vera juice, peppermint leaf. Some of these things are going to be much more easier for you because of the taste than others. Peppermint leaf has a kind of stronger of a taste. PHGG is something that's in a lot of our products. Lactulose syrup, sometimes I recommend it because of the profile, but it also has a laxative effect. It is a prescription in the US, but you can buy it outside and have it shipped in without a prescription. Almost every other country has it over the counter. We have a product called Mega Motility by Research Elements. It's kind of an all-in-one. If that's something that you want to take a look at, it's not necessarily, required. Sometimes deficits in the B vitamins can contribute to that motor complex issue there. So we recommend a spectrum vitamin. We have one. Um, you know, any good spectrum vitamin will be better than nothing or will help out certainly. So that covers the motility stuff. In the families that have the children that know that this is an issue, I suggest that you start this before starting the other suggestions because once you start changing the microbiome, the implications are that you can make the motility worse in the short term. It's like kind of yelling fire in a theater. Everybody wants to jump out, and then there's a traffic jam. When you release toxicity by shifting the microbiome, because these gram-negative microbes will explode and stuff like that, it causes that toxicity to basically make a traffic jam. It affects the mitochondria in the muscles in the gut, and it causes things to slow down. Even if you're not constipated, if you start taking things to shift the microbiome, you can increase your constipation in the short term. So it is very much like the choke on an engine, on a lawnmower, if you will, right? If you don't give it enough gas, it will choke and the engine will stall. So you have to kind of keep your finger on the needle here relative to how important the motility is an issue for you, how much support you need, and then dynamically the change in what you need as you start to implement some of the suggestions. Always know that with the program, you control the pace. So if you feel that there's too much reaction and too much reactivity, give a break, give a day's break, go every other day, give 2 days break until you can get things moving, particularly in the motility area, particularly in the reaction and reactivity area. There's no sense necessarily in just plowing through. You kind of want to keep your finger on that pulse to just make sure that you're able to impedance match what you can handle, what your child can handle. There's another blurb there about a recommended support vitamin. We talked a little bit about that. That makes sense because it helps in multiple things, potentially motility and just compensating for the upregulation in need of vitamins as you increase detoxification. There is another supplement that we designed. It's called KLL Detox. I mean, if there's one that I'd say parents from us that they should try, it's this one because this really helps to bring down a lot of the stimming, reaction, reactivity issues that someone may have. So it could be a go-to item for you, or it could be something that you do on a daily basis. It stands for KLL, kidney, lymph, and liver. So it has compounds in there to help the liver process more load, to help stimulate bile, to help the kidneys process more load, to help the lymphatics basically bring things out of the body. And it has a compound in there that helps with oxidative stress and histamine as well. Um, it, it it's a good one there. So if those are things that ring true to you, that's something that I would take a look at. And then towards the bottom of this page, there's a chart that gives kind of a brief description of types of dysfunctions and the compound that potentially could help if you have that. Now, based on the symptoms that you filled out, you might get a more detailed response, but typically the burdens that some of the kids experience are elevations in histamine, that can present as inability to fall asleep, circles under the eyes, skin issues, red cheeks or reactivities to perfumes and things like that. Ammonia away, burden caused by fungal issues. The histamine is really caused by just toxicity and dysbiosis in general, and mast cells releasing a lot of histamine. But the ammonia is caused by fungal and parasitic issues or overgrowths. It gets surges of ammonia that come into the body, and it can present with the symptoms of uncontrollable laughter, um, pressing on the head, not necessarily needing to have all of these things, teeth grinding, waking up spontaneously in the middle of the night. And those are indications of burdens of ammonia. Specifically with the laughter, it's more of a burden of the ammonia affecting the urea cycle and then overloading or inhibiting the body's ability to process nitrogen because the urea cycle and the nitrous oxide cycle sit next to each other in terms of amino acids that they use and they share to process those burdens. So when the body is too overwhelmed with the level of ammonia, your nitrogen starts to rise, particularly if you eat nitrogen-rich foods, which could be meat or chocolate, could set you off. When the nitrogen gets too high, then the bacteria in your gut actually convert that nitrogen into nitrous oxide. So it comes from nitric oxide to nitrous oxide, which is laughing gas. So they start to basically laugh uncontrollably or have these bursts. If you give the supplement ammonia away, it will stop these symptoms, the laughing, the teeth grinding, or the waking in the middle of the night, at the onset that you give it within about 15 minutes. It's a band-aid, right? So you have to give it before bed to help with the night waking, and you have to give it, at the moment of the laughter, the teeth grinding to help there. The laughing piece is also seen, and the teeth grinding piece is also seen in Rett syndrome. Rett syndrome has long been known to have dysfunctions of hyperammonemia, right, states of elevated ammonia. So these symptoms are very prevalent. That's a genetic disorder that affects girls. The laughing is also seen in deep sea divers that are go underneath the ocean for too long and they keep on inhaling their nitrogen exhaled gas, what they breathe, and they breathe it in because they're in a scuba gear. So there's a limit to how long that you can stay under the ocean, even with an oxygen tank, because you're breathing in. And if you go too long, more than an hour, they start to become maniacal. They get hysterical. They laugh uncontrollably. It's the same kind of effect of what's going on. The bacteria can convert this into nitrous oxide. You start to get giddy, if you will. Um, Oxalates present as urinary issues, grabbing of the privates, bladder issues. There's pain down there. It's caused by fungal overgrowth. When it's really bad, it tends to bulge out the kidneys area, and it tends to go to the eyes and cause pain in the eyes. Calcium citrate. We have a supplement that's called Oxy Relief. The main component in there is calcium citrate is very effective at binding out oxalates so that you poop them out. Oxalates can get worse. Same thing with ammonia and histamine as you start shifting the microbiome. So in some kids where they might do a little bit of these things, as you start taking a probiotic in the beginning or you start shifting things with an herb, you can see an exacerbation of these symptoms in the short term, right? Because stuff is getting released, or it's like more burden, more junk. When you go and you start to renovate your house, what happens? You kick up all the dust. It looks worse in the beginning during the renovation before you get to that point where it's better. Mitomind, you can go read about that. It's based on constituents that help speech and mitochondria. Some of them similar to the Kelly-Dorfman protocol. Is it necessary? No, but it's something that you could take a look at over time. Glutathione genesis can be very helpful at getting things out of a flare. It's a lotion that you put on, helps you to create more glutathione. ThyroGuard has been instrumental for a lot of people, particularly in the speech area. It seems to be very hit or miss. Some people help significantly, other people's it doesn't seem to help as well or at all. Uh, Probably because some of the mechanisms involved helps you to recycleize oxidized glutathione. So if you have a big burden of oxidized glutathione inhibiting that methylation SAMe pathway, then it will be a help there. It also helps you to convert cyanocobalamin, the version of B12, into hydroxycobalamin. And there's a lot of interesting things around it. Generally, I don't recommend taking that off of the bat, but those are things that you can look at over time. Um, ThyroGuard has the potential to increase constipation just because of what it helps bind out. So remember always to make sure that motility is supported and emphasized. Um, there's a couple of blurbs here of when you should take the supplements. I'm going to be working on some additional ancillary documents that kind of help you to pair what items may be better to go together. But there's a nice blurb over here that kind of gives you some information. What I would say is that with the suggestions that you have, if you can pair the probiotics with the prebiotics, that'll give you the best benefit there. And usually people will do that in a shake. They'll get some kind of yogurt, and they will mix in these powders. They will blend it up. They might put some fruit in there. You can get Concord grape juice. It's very good at flavoring things. It doesn't have any added sugar beyond the grapes themselves. The grapes themselves provide a benefit to the microbiome in a certain way. You put a splash of that in with the yogurt, you blend it up, you can get your kid to drink that. That's not going to be the situation for everybody. Some kids don't take anything. They don't take anything but water. So it's going to be much trickier in those situations. But we've have had some kids that have opened up to taking these shakes like this. If you want to mix them in applesauce or do something else like that, that's also another alternative. There are some non-dairy yogurts as well that you can use, coconut yogurts, almond yogurts, to blend this, but usually doing some kind of shake if the child cannot swallow the capsules is the most feasible way to get them to take it. But parents are very inventive, so they find some other ways as well. Um, Outside of the prebiotics and probiotics, I say you can blend pretty much anything else together and at any frequency. I wouldn't take things on a completely empty stomach. Taking it in a shake form usually gives it a nice buffer so that it doesn't cause any nausea. Because if you wake up and you take a B vitamin, it's going to make you nauseous. If you haven't eaten anything, it's just part of the game. So just have it eaten something within the last hour is usually enough to kind of prevent that. And then if you're doing the shakes, splitting them into two shakes a day seems to work feasibly in terms of the schedule. One in the morning, one when they come home from school or something like that. That's usually enough to kind of split the regimen into two. If you want to do it any other way, you can. The only other piece of advice would be I wouldn't give too many things before bed, just because it has the potential to interfere with sleep. Aside from things like a binder or the ammonia whey, I wouldn't really go for the biome shifting stuff before bed, right? The other stuff you should be okay. There's some information there about how to mix supplements, reaction and reactivity. If you get into a flare, there's some suggestions here that might be able to help you get out. So some things that are usually typically good are the KLL detox, additional vitamin C, making sure the bowels are moving, glutathione genesis lotion. There's another one that I'll be adding here. If sometimes kids have issues with acid reflux or even taking something like DGL tablets, D as in David, G as in game, L as in lollipop, DGL tablets. They are helpful. They help increase some glutathione. They help coat the stomach and stuff like that. Those have been kind of really helpful for some kids too. More to come on that in the future. Um, and then there's some blurbs there about milk and dairy and all that other stuff. Um, so this is an example of a week one suggestions. This was a very complicated profile, so it had like 20 items on it. So you'll see over here, it says week one at the top, week one on the left on the first column, and then you will see the product. Towards the end of this document, there'll be a way that you can click on a link and take you to that product that might help you find it easier. Do you have to buy it from that source? No, but it just gives you a picture so that you can track it down. So the product name, the dose amount, the dose unit, the days per week, and the microbe action, and then an idea of what type of thing that it is. So, for instance, if we read the first line, the product is Dysbiosis AZ1, researched elements. You're going to be taking 2 smidge spoons. These are spoons that come with the probiotic itself. They're very tiny. It's a 1/32 of a teaspoon. Two of those, 3 days per week. So you can choose the days. There is a calendar on the suggestions. I believe it goes like Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the case of 3 days, but you don't need to really stick to that. It's just pick 3 days, space it out, relatively evenly. And then you'll see that microbe action, this is the particular overgrowth that it's working on. So there's a 2 and there's a 1, 2 for this Clostridium, Pseudoclostridium, and 1 for Proteobacteria. If you wanted to focus on the more important things, you can exclude the ones, and then you'd be focusing on 2s and 3s. Or if you only wanted to focus on the 3s, you could pick those ones out. That's going to minimize the amount of suggestions that you need to take. So you'd have to manually go and cross these things out and do that. But that is something that you can do to just minimize the number of suggestions. In this profile, if we focused on 3, we'd have 1, 2, 3. Let's see, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Let's say 13 items if we focus on 3. So we're about cut things in half. So the unit is in that fourth column there. So it could be like the first item is a smidge spoon. We have capsules, we have teaspoons, and the days per week is just adjacent to that. If you see an item that's crossed out, what that means is that it's not going to be introduced for this week, but it will be introduced in a future week. So it's there specifically so that you know up front, hey, there's this item is going to come down to play later on. So week 2 suggestions looks exactly the same, except for that that item that was crossed out here is no longer crossed out. And otherwise, they have the same kind of format. Week 3 suggestions here, right? Some of these will increase per week in terms of the dose amount. So you want to take a look at that and make sure you're paying attention to that. Week 4, week 5, week 6, you want to be retesting around the week 5 to week 6 range time period. So just do the test around there, the second test. You don't have to stop anything. At this point, your biome is going to be pretty well equilibrated. Just go and take a test. It's going to take about 2, 3 weeks to get the test. And then there's a 4 week after period, week 7 to 10, where the suggestions are reduced. So it's the same suggestions, but if you look at the dosing, it actually decreases. It's about a half of what it was in the previous week before. So, whatchamacallit. That being said, the next couple of pages over here, we're going to have some information on the potential compounds that were recommended for the particular issues that you have, and the literature that describes that. This is really meant for the interested parent or the practitioner that is also getting these suggestions. For instance, some fiber is helpful with breaking up butyrate producers. If you click on this, it'll take you literature that kind of shows you that. Or ginger is helpful with breaking down Prevotella. If you click on this, it'll bring you to that web page, that reference article that says that. Sometimes there isn't one, and it's relationships that we've kind of inferred based on the history of doing this. Here are those same suggestions in a weekly format with a calendar, right? So it's going to basically have them all laid out Sunday through Friday. Once again, if you crossed certain items out because of the severity, then you'd have to also cross them out on this list as well. There's another page here that just gives some general information. Sometimes people outside the United States can't get certain things. In the case of the Saccharomyces boulardii, you can go with an alternative brand Florister versus SFI. There's some equivalents here with some alternative supplements that may give you some equivalents for those hard to find things. Here's a link to lactulose if it is in your profile that you can buy without a script. A link to another homeopathic that sometimes I use, and then some just very quick solutions for motility. We've already put that on the first page as well. Here are some links to some of the products. Currently, I need to kind of complete some of these links here, but you can click and see, it'll bring you to a picture of what this item actually looks like. Okay. And then I lost my PDF. Let's bring that back up here. There we go. And then that's pretty much it over there. There is a final page that I've recently included that's going to include some of the symptoms and some of the compounds that may be recommended. Up until now, I've been doing this by email, so right now this is blank here for this particular profile. But that gives you an idea of how to interpret the suggestions. I'm going to be having a couple of other videos added onto this here that will make the process a little bit more clear and helpful. It's not uncommon to see reaction and reactivity. It's not uncommon to see improvement in certain things and worsening in other things. It's very much like the stock market. Things go up and down. But if you measure over that, average over that time period, you should see improvement in certain clinical features. And then typically people do about 3 rounds. Not everyone needs to do that, but certainly that's been I'd say the average situation. And with seeing potential improvement different in each round, some people see better improvement in the second than the first, or vice versa. Thanks so much for listening. Hopefully this helps explain the suggestions over here, and I'll have some other videos to help you guys out as well.